Hello, everybody, and welcome to the now 19th episode of the BadMotoGP-Show. As you see, we have a new guest, Axel Pedersen. He's a motorcycle racer from Thailand and happened to be in the paddock during the Thai GP. So I thought it may be a great guest to have some insights. So how are you doing? How did you enjoy the Thai GP?
Hey, yeah, I'm happy to be here. The Thai GP was awesome. First Thai GP in 3 years. So the atmosphere in the paddock was a lot of excitement, and the riders really happy to be there. But then some rain, and I don't know, the weather was all over the place the whole weekend. So it was a really interesting one. I'm not sure how it was from the TV, but on the ground, it was a classic.
Yeah. How did you end up in Thailand?
Um, well, I was actually born in Thailand, and my parents work here. And during COVID, I really got into the national championship in racing, and yeah, so currently sitting, I think, fifth in the national standings for Super Sport 400.
So it's crazy. You have been born in Thailand, and have you been living there ever since, or did you
Yeah,
move? Okay, so
yeah, living
just
here ever since.
nice. Okay, because Thailand is actually a country I always wanted to visit because I like to fight Muay Thai. And
Yeah,
obviously, then I want to go to Thailand to train someday, and it's definitely on my bucket list. So maybe we can
yeah,
see each other there. But
yeah. Sounds
yeah,
good.
we're here to talk about the MotoGP race. We obviously had a wet race. And before we dive into it, I would like to cover, first of all, the Tom Booth Amos video. For everybody who didn't see it, check Everything Motor Racing. There's a video on Declan's Instagram where a mechanic is kicking and punching Tom Booth Amos after he came back into the box. It's pretty shocking. And what's even more shocking is that a lot of people came out and said, like, okay, this is not the exception, and this is quite normal. Not necessarily the violence part, but there are things that you normally don't see because they're not published. And yeah, so what are your thoughts on the video? Have you heard maybe other stories?
Honestly, with the video, if my crew chief were to do that to me, I wouldn't be very happy. We always give it our best out on track, and if things don't work out, racers in general, whether it's cars or bikes, usually like to find something to blame because we usually find it hard to admit that it was our own issues or our own speed. And I'm not sure in that exact situation if it was Tom's fault or if it was a mechanic's issue, but whichever party was in fault, it's not right.
Yeah, I mean, the most shocking thing to me is not necessarily that it happened, but that it happened 3 years ago. Nobody talked about it. Tom even said he kept his mouth shut. Other mechanics who were walking past it, nobody said a thing. And he said he was scared that he may lose his job for the 2020 season. And the same person is now working at Max Racing. So this hasn't been a particularly nice stretch for Max Biaggi and his reputation or his team's reputation in the paddock, because everybody knows about the Aragon incident where some mechanics of his team disrupted Adrian Fernandez start from the box into the qualifying, I believe it was. And yeah, now this, so that he hires a violent crew chief, which is not necessarily something you want to be associated with. So a tough stretch for Max Biaggi, and it's really shit when you're a MotoGP fan, you see it from the TV, you see everything that Dorna wants you to see. And it's all great, it's all fun and games. But as soon as you dive into the paddock, and I had this process, I started my Me page in 2020, I was just a fan, everything was fine. And then you start to talk to people who are in the paddock, you start to get to know people, they share stories, and it's so fucked up because, first of all, I experienced some bad things regarding the MotoGP world in Assen. I shared the story on my Twitter, on my Instagram, where sexual harassment towards my girlfriend when she went to the toilet or went to get some snacks from other fans, and nobody cared. I mean, the Dutch people, for them, it's kind of normal. The security they didn't care, and Dorna and the promoter and Assen or whatever, they didn't care as well, especially when we raised the issue and even reached out to Assen, the circuit. And I know for a fact that they knew what happened. They didn't care at all. So yeah, this is my personal experience, and to see this stuff happen over again, I've heard many stories, and it's so shocking that, of course, idiots are everywhere. Stuff like this unfortunately happens, but it's more shocking to me that this gets just wiped away, so it didn't even happen, you know?
Yeah, in the end, it's a show for the sponsors, and the sponsors need to have a platform that is family friendly to advertise on. And if Dorna talks about these things publicly, it might not seem as a attractive space for advertisers to put their businesses. But I think Dorna definitely behind the scenes should do something to increase well-being of the fans' experience, because in the end, it's the fans that are the ones that advertisers want to sell their products to, and if the fans aren't having a good time, they're not going to come to racing. So in the end, it's the fans that make the circuit go round. So
Yeah.
Dorna should optimize it for the fans.
Yeah, of course. Especially fans are decreasing, or fan numbers are decreasing, especially on live attendance. How was it in Thailand?
Definitely less than 2019, but bouncing back after 3 years of not having anything. Thailand still has a mask mandate, so we're still not 100% out of COVID yet, but the attendance was really good. The tickets did sell out, but there was a typhoon just leading up in the week to Buriram race, and it scared a few people from making the 5-hour journey from the capital city of Bangkok to Buriram.
Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunate. We obviously saw the typhoon in Japan. I don't know if it's the same one who traveled
No,
downwards.
it's a different one.
Okay.
It was called Typhoon Noru, and it came from around the Philippines area.
Okay. So yeah, and then obviously now with the rain, and we will cover all of it later. But yeah, regarding the whole MotoGP situation, because right now we live in a time where we have the internet. So we saw it in Formula One that a lot of women raised the issue against sexual harassment in Austria and in the Netherlands and at the Dutch GP there in Zandvoort. And the same with MotoGP, we have voices who start to raise the issue, and collectively, when everybody stresses it, then we may be able to change something. It may be not be able to deny it anymore, you know? So I said it in my Instagram story, I will say it again. If everybody who has a story to share or whatever, who don't want to share it because of their reputation in the paddock maybe, or because they feel like they have no voice, I'm here to help. So we can do things collectively. I know that reporters are collecting stories about sexual harassment towards women, and are trying to raise to help the women in the paddock to feel safer, and the fans as well to feel safer. So all of this is kind of happening, but Dorna is basically not doing anything. So we need to stress this issue, and apes together strong. So hopefully we can change something due to the power of the internet, because that's our voice, and collectively we can do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good point.
Yeah. And on to the next point, we had breaking news that MotoGP is heading to India and MotoGP is heading to Kazakhstan. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think India, there's many people there, as you know, with a population of over 1 billion. They're going to have no trouble filling out the seats if they make it affordable for the average person. There definitely is a lot of market for bike racing in India. I know one of my Paddock compatriots in Thailand actually got signed to an Indian factory to help develop some of their racing bikes for the Asian Championships. So TVS Racing is starting to send their riders to the Asian Championships and eventually to Europe, as well as Bajaj, which is an Indian bike manufacturer. You might have heard of it, but probably never have heard of it. They actually own a majority share of KTM. And that's actually a thing I've learned having chats with the CEO of Bajaj in Thailand about setting up a racing team, and they're really, really keen, and they really want to promote their bikes, and they're starting to branch out into Asia and eventually to the rest of the world.
I mean, we had an Indian company in Moto3 a couple of years ago with Mahindra. So this project unfortunately was shut down, but it was a good project. And as you said, India has so many people and so many motorcycle enthusiasts. It's a huge market for motorcycle brands, especially the smaller ones. The whole Southeast Asian part of the world, you probably know it better than I do. They are huge on those smaller motorcycles, and KTM, Honda, Yamaha, they are all big in these smaller bike markets. So Ducati is a little bit left out there, but who cares?
There are
Um,
actually a lot of Ducati owners in India, and because of the sheer amount of people, there's always going to be a lot of people that own Ducatis, even Aprilias in India. It's actually quite surprising how many owners there are.
yeah, but the stereotype is that they're riding small
Yeah,
bikes, riding
small
scooters, so that's the
displacement,
big one.
125 cc's. It's the seller in India. Especially, I know the Duke 200 from KTM is one of the most popular bikes in India, if for the manual shifting bikes. But the automatic ones are obviously much more popular as they are user friendly.
Yeah, so India, a huge market. I love it. I've been calling for an Indian GP for a while now. My only concern is that the racetrack is last used by Formula One. What was it, like 2012, 2013?
Yeah,
So,
around then.
and and it's still set to be set for homologation of the FIA or FIM
Yeah.
standards. So that could be an issue. We saw it in Finland that a track who isn't ready has been put on the calendar, and now Finland is nowhere. So
Well,
I'm a little
it's
bit
you.
skeptical.
Yeah, same. But I feel like everyone was as well for the Thai GP in Buriram. You know, it's in the middle of nowhere. Buriram is 350 kilometers away from the capital city, and not much in the town except for a football stadium. But it's turned out to be one of the most popular events on the Grand Prix calendar. So if all the stars align and the track is ready and the fans are out in full force, then I think it's set to be a great GP.
Yeah, and I really hope that they make it work because India, as I said, is a great market for all the manufacturers because of the sheer amount of people and the kind of people India has, because they are into those small motorcycles especially. And the Indian fans deserve one. There are a lot of Indian fans reaching out to me, for example, and I feel like India has all the potential in the world to be one of the best races in the calendar, and I hope that they manage to pull it off because the fans and the brands deserve it, but the organization has to be set up properly, you know.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan is kind of a weird one for me because first of all, I've heard stories that one of Camelo's nephews, I believe, has some ties to Kazakhstan. So I don't know if it's a relationship or just yeah, you know, family. I don't know, but apparently there is something in the back why MotoGP is going to Kazakhstan. I don't know about the fan community in Kazakhstan. I've never heard of a MotoGP fan from Kazakhstan, but I'm here to be educated on this topic. And I don't know if the market in itself is attractive for motorcycle brands. Therefore, my first impression is like that it's similar to Qatar. There's a lot of money, and that's why MotoGP is going there, even though there's not a great interest in fans or a great market for motorcycles. So this would be my critique, but I don't know because it's just a first impression. I could be totally wrong because, as you know, I don't know a flying fuck about Kazakhstan. And so, yeah, maybe you know a little bit more there.
Well, I think it kind of sprung us all by surprise when we saw that MotoGP was going to be racing in Kazakhstan. But I think it's awesome. I think Kazakhstan's definitely coming out to the world, especially because it was a Soviet Union country, and now that they're having more and more visitors each year, I think a MotoGP race could be interesting. But I'm like you, where I'm not sure about the fan community in Kazakhstan, but they have a track, so there must be some sort of desire to race motorcycles.
Yeah, the images of the track, they're kind of weird because you have this one grandstand, a little bit like Qatar. You have one grandstand where the fans are supposed to be sitting and no grandstands elsewhere. Because whenever you go to Austria, you go to Italy, or you go to Spain, there are grandstands everywhere because the thing is packed and it smells like a Grand Prix with 30,000 people maximum attending the Grand Prix. So I don't know if that's necessarily
Yeah.
the type of Grand Prix MotoGP wants, especially when Formula One is selling out Singapore with 300,000 and all of this. There's always this comparison with Formula One, especially with people attending the races, because they seemingly can't miss. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, but actually in the summer when I've been to Austria, I talked to Simon Pedersen, the MotoGP journalist from the race, and he told me about Kazakhstan and said, "Hey, they're working on this." So he proved to be right on this one. So yeah, I'm excited, but with both of these GPs, I have a gut feeling that one of them won't work out because for some reasons or whatsoever, and they will replace it with Aragon. That's my gut feeling on it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe
Yeah,
I'm right,
it's
but
just a
yeah.
shame that they had to remove Aragon from the calendar as it is. It proves to be one of the great Spanish tracks. As you know, there are plenty of tracks in Spain, and it is one of the newer ones. So the safety there is definitely better than some other tracks, such as Jerez, where we saw in 2020 when Marquez returned, or something in 2021 actually, sorry, where he actually went into the air fence and it looked quite dangerous.
Yeah, with Aragon, the thing is, I'm totally with you. It's a great track, but so is Jerez, so is Catalonia, and Valencia gets a lot of shit, but I've been there last year, and for the fans, it's one of the best GPs you can
Hmm.
attend.
I
The
think
whole
motorcycle racing is inherently Spanish, so they having 4 races in Spain, I think, is part of MotoGP in the last 20 years.
Yeah, but you can't have 25 GPs, so you have to cut down Spain, especially because they have 4 races when you take Portugal into consideration, which is kind of next to Spain.
Yeah,
Then you have five races in this place of the world. So I would like to have a rotation calendar,
yeah,
which
that would be a great
Formula
idea.
One yeah, which Formula One did in Germany back in the day when they had Hockenheim and Nürburgring rotating each year. So 2 GPs in Spain would be fun, where you have Valencia and Aragon, for example, one year, and Jerez and Catalonia
Yeah,
the other year.
yeah, that's a great idea, honestly, and it really depends on the year whether the racing's good or not. But missing out on Aragon for the next 5 years would be, I think, a loss for the sport.
Yeah. And regarding the new calendar, there's a lot of traveling. And when you race, how much do you travel across Thailand?
Well, I think traveling from Bangkok to Buriram is our biggest drive. When we're towing the trailer with the bikes, it's about 6 hours. And other than that, we go around maybe 2 hours maximum to the other tracks.
How much does it affect your performance when you have a lot of traveling stress?
Um, Honestly, yeah, for Buriram, we have to wake up at around 4 a.m. to get there for 10 a.m. So we get there and then we set up and then we're ready for the next day. And that kind of affects me as I'm still attending school. So it means I have to miss an extra day, but also, I mean, it's a lot of fatigue for my parents. You know, my dad has to drive all the way up there, or my mum, and then they're usually resting for the rest of the day, and I have to help set up the pits. And yeah, by about 8 p.m. we're like already in bed, ready to go to sleep. But and yeah, it definitely takes a toll on the body.
Especially when I imagine that next year, when the calendar goes along as they planned, that you have to be like 6 or 8 weeks away from home, traveling across Asia, which will be extremely difficult, especially when you do it late in the year, when people have accumulated injuries, people are a little
Yeah,
bit more stressed by the GPs in general. And then you have like the maybe the worst time of the year to be in Thailand, for example, when you have rain season there. So I don't
Yeah, rain
necessarily
season
understand it.
is supposed to end in late October. I think the best time for a race in Buriram would be probably the start of the year, maybe even replacing Qatar as the first GP could have been a good idea, as leading up to Buriram, plenty of time to get things there. I think having Japan and Buriram 1 week after each other really puts a strain on the logistics system, especially because there is a runway in Buriram and an airport, but it's not long enough to land large cargo planes such as the 747. So most of the cargo has to be sea freighted in, and then it accumulates over a few months leading up to the GP. And of course, all the bikes are flown in the crates, but it really puts a big stress. And I'm honestly surprised that FP1 was not combined with FP2 like we saw in Japan.
Yeah. I mean, you pointed something really important out, which I don't understand also, because when I would set up a calendar, I would go to Australia, I would go to Thailand, I would go to Indonesia at the beginning of the year and have it like in February or even January, I don't care,
Yeah,
because it's summer there. So you can split the overseas part into 2 races and then go there whenever the time is right. And then you have the European summer and maybe have a little bit more of an extended summer break. Or like this year, we have a 5-week summer break, which is great if you're a rider, especially if you have so many races when sprint races come next year. Then maybe
yeah,
we should talk about 2 breaks when we have the first third of the season with a larger break, then the middle part of the season with a larger break, and then the end part of the season. But it makes no sense for me to go to Phillip Island now when there's it's freezing cold there, and go to Valencia, for example, in late November. It makes no sense to me.
yeah. Actually, in Phillip Island now, it's starting to heat up. As you know, Australian summer is in December, so it's coming out in spring right now. But in Thailand, we actually are in the northern hemisphere, so having a race in January would be better for the riders, as ambient temperatures are usually below 30 degrees Celsius. But I've been in Buriram probably mid-July, where the track temperature is over 70 degrees and the air temperature is around 40 degrees. And I'm sitting in my leather suit, and I believe it's probably around 70 degrees inside my suit. That's if you're a rider and you want to train and you want to become really fit, just go ride in the Thai heat for 20 minutes. I tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just like going to the sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, regarding the MotoGP race in Thailand, we talked a lot about the calendar. We talked a lot about the other shit going on in the MotoGP world. So let's dive into the MotoGP race in itself, where Miguel Oliveira won. And it seemed like a copycat race of the Indonesian Grand Prix. We had dry free practices, dry qualifying, and then a wet race with no preparation at all. And Miguel Oliveira made it work. I've been vocal about it, and Miguel Oliveira, in my opinion, is the best KTM rider they have. It's the best KTM rider in history, and they let him go. And whenever he has a bike underneath him, which works, which it does in the rain, supposedly, he is almost unbeatable. He almost beat Marc Marquez at the Sachsenring last year. He beat Fabio Quartararo in Catalonia. He is so good if the bike works, but KTM seemingly don't know what the hell they are doing, and it's a wrong strategy if your bike is shit in the dry and good in the wet. So yeah, but good ride for him. Very, very mature. I'm very happy for him. So kudos to him.
Yeah, for sure. Miguel, you could see he was hunting Jack. Jack started pretty well, of course, after Bez had his drop one place penalty, which we can get onto later. But Jack was out leading, and I saw Oliveira and I saw Zarco as well, and I'm like, these two are going for Jack. And sure enough, Oliveira overtook into, I think, the final corner into 12 and made it stick. Jack couldn't cut back and went a bit wide. You could see from the post-race interviews that he was actually losing the front and the rear at the same time, so he just couldn't turn the bike. And yeah, Miguel Oliveira really did the job he needed to do, showing KTM what they'll be missing next year, but also for Ruslan Razali. He'll be excited with his new prospect, and especially Raul Fernandez on the Aprilia next year could be really exciting.
Yeah, of course. With KTM, the thing is, a lot of people have high hopes for Jack Miller at KTM, which I honestly don't have, because the problem with KTM is they have this steel frame which nobody else runs, and Miguel Oliveira and Brad Binder are the only ones who are successful with the steel frame. So when you have two riders who've been with KTM from basically the beginning of their career. I mean, Brad Binder, let's neglect Moto3 for a second. Brad Binder and Miguel Oliveira have been on KTMs with a steel frame since 2017 in Moto2. And it seems to pay dividends. And on the other hand, KTM doesn't give those rookies or the other riders coming in not enough time to develop those skills. So I don't know if Jack Miller necessarily can adapt quickly enough to the KTM, because it seems to take everybody years.
Yeah, I think having a steel frame in Grand Prix is pretty unheard of now. Even the Moto3 and Moto2 are all using aluminium at the very least. And I know Honda and stuff have been developing carbon frames, and I spoke to some of the guys in Ducati and some of the Öhlins guys as well. I had dinner with a few of them, and they were the ones that are doing the Suzuki and the Ducati seem to have a much easier job than the guys doing KTM, because obviously, well, KTM don't do Öhlins, but they all talk to each other. They have WP, but the steel frame is just it's quite behind. Honestly, my production bike still has a steel frame, and it's the steel tubing frame, and I think KTM have thankfully moved away from a steel tubing, but I think that frame is still too old to do anything.
Yeah, I don't know if they're running some kind of hybrid nowadays. I don't know. KTM has to answer this question. I can't. But it's kind of weird with the WP suspension as well, because I had the suggestion that maybe the Öhlins is just better and it works just better, and KTM is running on bad material from the steel frame to the suspension. So I mean, it's hard for them because they sell all of their street bikes with steel frame. Basically the same with Yamaha and their inline four. And if they move away from it, they basically say, okay, our way is shit, the other way is better. So that's no way they will move away from it. No way Yamaha will come over with a V4, because it will basically say that all of their products are shit and the V4 or the aluminium is better.
Yeah, and I think for sure I've spoken to some of the KTM MotoGP riders. I can't name names, but they say that the bike, it doesn't turn, that it's super heavy in the corners. They can't turn in. Corner entry, they're losing so much just trying to get the bike to lean in. And if you watch the KTM on TV, you can see that it is only Brad and Miguel that can get that bike turned in. And I think some other KTM riders, present and past, visually having trouble getting that bike to turn in.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we had this topic on the podcast a couple of times, when you have people like Remy and Raul, who absolutely murdered the whole Moto2 field last year. Raul came in and as a rookie and he demolished everybody except Remy. And those two get on the same bike and get outclassed by Fabio Di Giannantonio, then something is wrong.
Yeah. Honestly, Remy and Raul, their race times from last year have yet to be beaten. Honestly, the only people that could have come close were Honda Team Asia in Austria, but with the new chicane, it kind of throws it all into the water, and we can't really compare. But Remy and Raul are definitely two top class riders, and I think Remy is happy to be making the move to World Superbike, because I think he knows that's going to be a cool environment. No ride height devices, just him and the bike. But he's definitely sounded really sad to be leaving the Grand Prix paddock, where he made a name for himself.
Yeah, of course, especially when you know you can do it. Remy is a world champion, and I believe he sees like even a Luca Marini or somebody like this, no? Not a world champion, but still a very solid rider, getting top fives, and you see this, and you know I'm capable of doing it, but unfortunately I ride a bike which is shit, and my manufacturer won't give me time, and I don't know what the hell is going on with KTM.
Yeah, honestly, they said he was unprofessional, but I doubt that. From just what I've seen in the paddock, just walking around, he was the last rider to leave his box on the end of Friday practice. You know, he was dedicated to staying with his mechanics and working solutions out for the next day. And he's been increasing his performance incrementally throughout the year. But of course, everyone else makes developments. But from where he was at the start of the year to where he's on the KTM now, it doesn't look like a hell of a lot of progress, but he's leaps and bounds in terms of feeling with that steel frame to where he was. And I think next year, had KTM given him more time, he could maybe do something better.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you see it even in the race where he is like top 10 or 11, 12 or whatever for a short period of time. And apparently they had some issues with the front tire as well. So,
Yeah.
and unfortunately he crashed.
Yeah, it's a shame, especially with that lack of practice that you mentioned, that they have to just hop on the full wet track on the front tire, that they're not super sure about the setting. I think they can really look back at Indonesia for that, but you know, that was the beginning of the year. This is the end of the year, and obviously the track surface in Thailand is, according to the riders, it's the best for wet grip in the whole calendar. So they can't really base it too much off Indonesia.
Didn't Yamaha say that they had no grip at all, and the grip at the track was low, and it's not comparable to Indonesia because Indonesia was so high? That's what I
Yeah,
heard.
that's well, you can see that Yamaha weren't doing quite well. So maybe it's the bike and the asphalt characteristics, but John McPhee and Jack Miller seem to love the grip characteristics. So it could be working for specific bikes, such as the KTM and the Ducati.
Yeah, of course. So, which brings us to a very interesting topic, which is the championship right now, because Pecco finished in a very, very mature third place. There was a lot to lose for him, but he didn't. He stayed cool, and especially when you consider that wet races haven't been his strong point over the last couple of yeah, when you take Japan into
Is even looking
consideration.
at Indonesia.
Yeah, he had like 1 point there. Yeah, so you have this. Then Fabio had a catastrophic race. He didn't even want to talk to the media afterwards because he was so pissed off. And Cal Crutchlow said that everybody at Yamaha had the same problem, and the front tire was just cooking during the warm-up lap even, and therefore they couldn't overtake. Frankie said that he had a very, very good pace, but simply couldn't overtake. And basically what was said, I believe, by Crutchlow was that the wet race basically maximized Yamaha's problems and made them worse in terms of, yeah, I believe the braking stability of the Yamaha in the wet was nowhere because of the front tire. And
Yeah,
yeah, which was very, very unfortunate for Fabio because
especially
he
in a
was
wet race,
fast.
you have to, yeah, in a wet race, you really have to have good drive on the straights, because it's probably the easiest part of the lap in terms of a wet track. You know, you can make a lot up in the straights just with the sheer top speed. You know, you could have a mediocre rider on the Ducati going super fast in the wet just by going fast in the straights and taking it easy in the corners, whereas a Yamaha rider will have to push in the corners, and because on the straights they're a little bit slower.
And it feels like over the season that Yamaha, especially Fabio, makes up all of his time on the braking because he is such a motherfucker on the brakes. And if that doesn't work, and the whole other bike part of the bike doesn't work, then I mean Yamaha has rear grip issues since forever, since Valentino Rossi and Maverick Vinales. They have no top speed at all. The cornering always has been their strong point, but Ducati seem to be catching up on this one. And the
Yeah.
braking, if that goes, what else is left, you know?
Yeah, post race actually, I was in Jack Miller's box, and um, one of the Ducati bosses, I'm not sure if it was Paolo Ciapatti or Gigi Dall'Igna, but he comes in and goes to Jack's suspension guy Reese, who's actually from New Zealand, and says, "You're a wizard. You're a fucking wizard," because he said Jack said that bike was the best wet setup he'd ever had, and as you can see that they're bringing in new guys and they're really just getting that bike to turn, even whether it's the setup or the suspension and geometry of that bike, it's really working out now.
I mean, Fabio was a long distance away from Pecco before he crashed in Assen, which says a lot because Assen is not a Ducati track. Assen is like the perfect Yamaha track, but he still got his ass whooped by Pecco in this tracks. That says a lot about Ducati and the state of Ducati.
Yeah,
They
I think
can win
now
everywhere.
it's yeah, Ducati. There will always be a Ducati on the podium, I think, this year. It's just I'm surprised with the Aprilia as well. That's been turning out to be one of the best bikes on the grid, but that was nowhere in Buriram either.
Yeah, I believe they brought a harder rear tire, basically the same they did in Indonesia, which seems to be an older version of the Michelin rear tire.
Yeah. And even Paul Espargaro was complaining about that in Indonesia, how they brought new tires for the test, but then didn't bring the same tire allocation to the race, and it really messed him up. And they like to bring the hard rear tire, even wet and dry, because it can handle the temperature. And with the extreme heat that could happen in Buriram, there's the danger of the tire tearing open.
How much did the track dry up over the race? Because it seemed like that, as you see on the screen behind us, it was quite wet at the beginning, especially
Yeah,
coming from that Moto2 race. But at the end, it seemed better. But
towards the end, honestly, I'd say we were about 3 laps away from Brad Binder putting slicks on. It was almost dry, and you could see that post race there was a dry line there, and the grip there was no standing water except at turn 8 where there's a little bit of a trough of water, let's say.
okay, so yeah, it should have been beneficial to put on the harder wet tire towards the end, but I guess towards the beginning, the softer would have been
Yeah,
better, you know.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
with the riders, how wet it was in the beginning, there would be not too much wear on the soft, and I think for sure they probably wouldn't have struggled with the soft.
okay. So yeah, and with Aprilia, it's another very unfortunate weekend because Aleix can't seem to catch a break. I mean, he had
Yeah,
all the tools in his toolbox to win the world championship, especially with Fabio struggling now, with Pecco struggling at the beginning of the year. But there are some kicks between the legs for Aleix, some with his own fault, like the crash in Silverstone, which seemed to be a golden opportunity for him, and then the echo mapping he had in Japan, which was very, very unfortunate. But
yeah,
when you take a season, then I feel like bad luck cancel each other out because Pecco has been taken out by Taka in Catalonia. Fabio has been taken out by Marc Marquez in Aragon, and Aleix had the unfortunate situation in here in Japan. And
yeah,
this kind of equals each other out. But what counts then is what you make with the rest. And when you have races like Aleix had in Silverstone, or which he had now again in Thailand, it's very, very unfortunate, and this can't happen.
yeah, yeah. I think for Aleix, his head's still in the game. I spoke to him on Tuesday pre-race, and he seemed very relaxed and like he wasn't even worried about what happened in Japan. He's definitely got the championship winning pedigree, even if it is from 2004. I mean, it's still in him, and I think this year it's really brought out the fighter back in him.
Yeah, but it seems like that Aprilia is somehow new to the whole championship game, you know? I mean, they've
Yeah,
been in MotoGP for a while, but they've never been on top, and that there are some struggles which doesn't happen in Yamaha and Ducati, you know?
yeah. I think the bike's good, and the guys there are definitely talented at setting it up. But you come to a track that you haven't been at in 3 years, and they haven't had any people to like ride it and develop it. You know, you look at the European tracks, they've had Dovi on that bike, and I think Dovi definitely played a large role in getting that bike to where it is today. And obviously, bringing in Vinales is definitely a big power play from Aprilia. But now they're in a position, yeah, where they don't have much experience. But honestly, that will come with time. Even if it's not this year for Aprilia, it looks promising for the next 5 years.
Yeah. If I was Aprilia, I would have just put the Austria setting on there because the track's basically the same. So this should work. Work smart, not
Yeah,
hard.
exactly. The one thing about Buriram though that is different to Austria is that the corners tighten a lot more. You look at the middle sector of Buriram and Austria. In Austria, sorry, it's a kind of a uniform corner where there's not too much trail braking. But in Buriram, you look at turn 5, it tightens so much, and it catches the riders out. Like even on Friday, a lot of riders were going wide there, and it really destroys the front tire.
Especially you have to hold a very tight line to the entry to the exit of the corner to get good drive out of it and to go right in the following turn. So you have to keep it to the left very much, I would assume. Yeah. And
you're in that corner and it's destroying your left tire, and then even at turn 12, the braking zone's so hard for trail braking as well that it destroys the right side of your tire. So at least it's balanced, but it's definitely very hard on the tires.
yeah. And with LA, she had this penalty. So you're a racer. What do you make of this penalty?
I think Aleix was a bit out of line there. You know, he's trying to make passes that his bike is not ready to do. I think he just needed to bide his time. There was 25 laps for them to play around, and I know you got to make the pass when there's a gap, but there wasn't really a gap. And you know, Brad Binder brakes really late, and I think for Aleix, I think that was not the place to pass him.
So do you think the penalty was the right decision?
Yeah, in the end, the penalty doesn't change the event, and I think it's racing. I think Aleix shouldn't have done it, but the penalty is not going to teach him anything because you know you're a racer, you're always going to go for the gap, and I think the penalty didn't change much of the final result, so it doesn't really matter.
I feel like if it had been a dry race, then I would understand the penalty more. But it's basically his first braking zone in the wet race conditions, and he just made a minor mistake, but nothing happened.
I think even more so the Bezzecchi penalty is a great example of that. Like it's the first corner in a wet race. Where do they know where to how do they know where to brake? And I think that Jorge Martin really put the pressure on Bezzecchi to force an error, but Bezzecchi, didn't chicken out. He just stuck it straight down the line, and Jorge Martin, he could have just stood it up, but Bezzecchi, that was real racing there, and I think there was no outbraking himself or anything wrong there. Bezzecchi's turning in, he's holding the line. He's got to do what he wants to do to make the corner.
Yeah. The Aleix penalty, I don't see it because to me that this is not a penalty, but the Bezzecchi penalty outrages me because it's the first corner, as you said, and he's a rookie. He has never been in a race like this, or you could argue Indonesia, but he wasn't on pole in this race. So you don't know what the fuck you're doing in this situation. Even if you're a MotoGP rider, you're basically going by your instinct. And he made a mistake. Okay, cool. Happens. So he runs wide. And a lot of people, Jorge Martin ran wide as well. He didn't get a penalty. Pedro Acosta ran wide in Moto2. He didn't get a penalty. So I don't
first corner
understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't understand. If you put a asphalt patch there, okay, cool. Let the riders use this when they made a mistake and let them recover. But to have this drop one position penalty, which I've never seen in MotoGP, I only saw it in Formula 1 when you overtake off track. It's
Yeah.
It's outrageous to me. It's so
Yeah,
stupid.
it's motorcycle racing on the first lap. You can't really decide one position. And if Bezecchi like lifts off the throttle to drop one position, more riders are just going to follow through, and it's just going to kind of mess up his whole race. As you can see, like right there, Jorge Martin is trying to send it down the inside of Bezecchi, but he's actually on the racing line. Martin is off the line and trying to gain an advantage, which it's his right. It's the start of the race, but Bezecchi's just swinging around the outside and forcing Martin to check up and run wide. I mean, that's Martin's fault for being there, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
to me, it's just an instance where you count it as a point for panel for track limits violations. But when you have like 3, 4, or 5 of them, you get a long lap. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
It's the same with the race. When you go off the curb for 2 centimeters or for 2 meters, it's basically the same penalty wise.
yeah,
You can't do too much of it. But to have this stupid drop one position, which disrupts his whole rhythm, he's been going backwards ever since, and to me, it's just outrageous.
yeah. I think if Dorna really want to impose something for the riders as a warning system, there could be a black and white flag, which we don't actually see very much in MotoGP, which is just warning for on-track behavior. And honestly, that would be a stretch to even give him the black and white flag for that instance. But in the end, it doesn't affect his track position.
Yeah, the flip side of the coin would be obviously that if you don't penalize this behavior, everybody would just go wide in the first corner, have better drive out of the corner, and gain positions this way, which to me would be illegal, would be gaining positions not on the track. Um, Gaining positions off track this, but he didn't gain or lose any position.
Yeah.
He had no
If I'm
advantage doing
being
this.
honest, yeah, at turn one in Buriram, I frequently run in the green on the first lap. It's pretty standard that things can get a bit hectic, and he didn't gain an unfair advantage. He started first and ended first by turn three. So it's the start of a race. Anything can happen, and if you put a gravel trap there, yeah, maybe he runs into the gravel, but maybe he tries to keep it on the circuit. But in the end, it's really just going to disrupt everybody and make things a bit more dangerous. Because if you have gravel there, right on the edge of the circuit, they're all just going to like keep it tight, but then someone's going to slide out because they're going in hot and they're going to turn in extra, and then they'll slide out into the gravel, and then you're just going to force more crashes. In the end, he was avoiding Martin making contact, which is really responsible because he doesn't want to, mess up another Ducati's race as well as his own. But yeah, it's racing, but it's a penalty that shouldn't have been awarded to him.
Do you do it on purpose to run wide, or is it just on accident?
Um, when I get pushed out wide, yeah, I just go out there and I won't like actively lean on other riders to make sure I stay in the track. It's the first lap. I want to give everyone room as well as get the best start I can. If I'm on the inside and I'm pushing riders wide, they have the option to slow down and let me in, of course, but you're a racer, you're not going to do that. You force the error. That's what you do. So I would personally not worry about running out wide if it was going to happen. If I was Bezecchi, I wouldn't actively think, oh shit, it's the race start. I'm gonna run wide. Let me shut the throttle and not run wide. No, no way.
What
The
would you
safest thing for
say?
him to do would be run wide.
What would you say? How much of an advantage do you gain by running wide and having better drive out of turn one?
Not much actually, because it's soaking wet, and I don't know if you saw the Moto2 crash of Cameron Bobier, but the paint in Buriram when it gets wet, it's literally an ice rink. So if anything, it gave him a disadvantage by having to run onto that paint, because I think he had to apply less throttle. If not, like he could keep the same throttle, but that's going to make it much more sketchy for him and probably a worse drive.
Okay. And I don't remember the first corner in Austria, but I can almost guarantee you that a lot of riders have been running
Yeah.
wide there, and there were
I think
no
I remember
penalties at all.
Marquez running fairly wide there. Not this year, of course, but last year or whenever he was racing there last. And he didn't gain an advantage, but he just kind of stayed in the same place. And then, yeah, that was it. But I think because it's at the lead and it's a high profile place to be, I think Dorna wanted to do something just to kind of say it's not okay if you're the leader and you run wide into the green.
To me, it's just stupid from the beginning to the end. I mean, the race direction fucked up once again, and they potentially destroyed Marco Bezzecchi's first win or first podium, you know?
Yeah, I think for him that's really tough, to have such a good result on Saturday, breaking the lap record, and then to have it kind of ripped away from you on Sunday is harsh. But he's a rookie; he's got many years of fighting left in him, and I'm sure we haven't seen the last of a Bezzecchi leading into the first corner.
Yeah. How much would you say would this disrupt your rhythm if you are in Bezzecchi's position? You have like a 1.5-second lead, and then you get the sign, drop one position. How much does it fuck with your head, fuck with your rhythm?
It would suck more being in Bezzecchi's position because of the 1.5-second lead. He has to lift off probably for I'd say half a second, if not more. And on a MotoGP bike, that's losing probably around 20 kilometers an hour on the straights. Basically put him on a Yamaha, and he's going through the corners, and you're focused. You have tunnel vision, and then you see drop one position. You're like, what for? What for? The first thing you'll be like questioning why. That's stupid. I don't want to do it, but then you just kind of forced to do it. Otherwise, you'll get a longer penalty, and then you drop the position. You're pissed off. You're getting passed, and your whole mentality is just gone from there.
Yeah, because he was still in a good position. He was in second. He was between Jack Miller and Pecco Bagnaia, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah.
then somehow something changed with his pace. And to me, from the outside, it's pretty easy to explain that when I believe he left Jack Miller through after turn one. So he was basically, as you said, lifting or getting off the throttle for a good amount of time. And then you have to calculate that the breaking point afterwards into, is it turn two or turn three in
Turn three.
Builder? Okay. Because I don't understand when necessarily this is a turn and when not.
No,
but
on the GP bikes in the dry, they do have to turn a little bit, but yeah, it's not really a corner. But
okay. But yeah, your breaking point is different then. And if you have all those things, I believe it could impact your race and your rhythm a fair bit.
yeah, just they're like robots. They're going to brake at the same place every lap if they can, and having to lift off and then brake somewhere else. It's just, I think it's worse than having a long lap penalty.
Yeah.
Because you have to choose kind of, if you see long lap penalty, you know exactly where to go, and then throughout the weekend you can plan and you can try and go through it. But for Bezzecchi, he has to lift off, and then he doesn't know where to brake for turn three, and then he'll get passed by more riders. And then as soon as you get passed by more than three riders, you start getting demoralized, and that's kind of the end of your race.
And we talked about Jack Miller now. When he took the lead, then he was very good. Unfortunately, beat by Miguel Oliveira from his perspective. But he has now two very, very good races in Motegi and in Thailand. So where do you see him in the championship fight?
Yeah, he's sneaking up on the leaders. If he had won that race, he would have been fourth in the championship at only 35 points away. But I think having second makes it a bit tough for him. He's got 40 points to make up in 3 races. So 75 points up for grabs and only 40 points needed. Mathematically, it's not out of reach, but Fabio, Aleix, Bagnaia will need to crash or have technical issues for probably more than one of the next upcoming races.
Yeah. I said it before we went to Japan that the overseas races will be a huge wildcard for the championship. And right now it proves to be true because shit is hitting the fan. And and I can definitely see Jack Miller having 3 very, very solid races. But I don't see him winning the championship by himself. It would need to involve a poor race of
Yeah.
Pecco and Fabio, and then another very good race for Jack Miller and mediocre performances from those. Because when, let's say, he wins out, he has 75 points and he has to gap 35 points, which means that he has like roughly in 3 races worth 35, roughly 12 points to make up per race,
Per race, yeah.
which is a big ask.
Yeah, I think for Fabio will do probably very well in Phillip Island, I believe. You know, it's a track that requires high corner speed and some hard braking as well, especially into the corner after Stoner Corner. But going to Sepang, you know, Yamaha have great backing there, and the track really suits Fabio. As you know, in 2019, I think he was pretty close to the top of preseason testing. Although those 2 very long straights could throw the Ducatis back into the mix where they belong. And then that leads us into our final race in Valencia, where we know Jack is really strong from his fight with Morbidelli a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, with Malaysia, it's a little bit tricky because the Ducati is good everywhere, you know,
Yeah,
but the Yamaha has all the corner speed. We have these long sweeping kind of chicanes, these S's,
yeah.
and these hard braking points into like turn 1. Then what is it? The after those tight
Turn
corners when
5, the
you,
final
yeah,
corner as well.
yeah, and
Turn
then
10.
the corner before you go on the long straight for the last corner. I don't know which turn it is,
I'm not
but
sure what number it is as well, but
yeah.
yeah, that corner as well as the very final corner, all very hard braking zones.
Yeah, and Fabio is, as I said, he's a motherfucker on the brakes, but he has one big problem, which is called a Ducati. The Ducati is good on the brakes, the Ducati is good on acceleration, and the Ducati is good on corner speed, and you can't overtake them if you're not in front of them in the qualifying, you know? When you
Yeah.
are 5th and Pecco is 1st, Jack Miller is 2nd, and let's say Jorge Martin is 3rd, and Bastianini is 4th, you can't overtake them. That's the big problem of MotoGP right now, because when you're Fabio, when do you overtake them? You have no power outside of the corners. You have all the braking stability of the Ducati, which makes it hard to pass into the corner. I mean, passing a KTM would be easy, but or an Aprilia, they have a little bit more troubles on the brakes. But the Ducati, it's one of the strong points, and the combination of very good acceleration and very good braking is pretty hard to beat. I guess I don't tell you anything new here. So I see Fabio needs to be good in qualifying, which is unfortunate because the Ducati is so damn good on qualifying. I can see him winning in Australia, but I don't see him being good in the final 2 races, unfortunately.
Honestly, with Jack, he's just off the back of probably his 2 best ever performances in MotoGP. He's going to get married next week, and then it's his home race. I think he's high on life right now and enjoying everything. And in Australia, I know there's going to be a lot of pressure, as we saw with Chantra in Moto2 for your home race. But if he can just get himself into a sort of mentality like Ayagura was last week in Japan and just focus himself, we know he can go out and win it. We know he has the speed. Obviously, in 2019, he took 3rd there when the Ducati wasn't super strong in the corners. So I'm excited to see where he stands this year.
Yeah, especially when Ducati has all the Ducatis in front, which brings us a little bit to the next topic, which will be Johann Zarco and the whole team order thing. But it's tough to beat one Ducati, but it's even tougher to beat 5 of them.
Yeah, well, I think that's what sets Fabio apart. You know, he's the only one who's really taken the fight to them other than Marquez this weekend. But Fabio's putting up a good fight. He always does. And he sneaks some interesting overtakes, like we saw him on Jack Miller in Austria at the chicane. That kind of came out of nowhere and sprung Jack by surprise. It just depends what tires they bring to Malaysia, as well as what the weather's like in Phillip Island. You know, it's starting to be summer in Australia. It could have rain, and I think Fabio, he looked like he was okay in the rain mid-year, especially in the beginning in Indonesia, but towards the end of the year, he seems to be struggling a lot in the wet.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when your front tire isn't working and that's the only thing which works for your bike, you know. But yeah, in Australia, there aren't many hard acceleration zones. You have a very flowing type circuit, which should benefit him. And but which also should benefit the Ducatis in a way, you know. And
Yeah.
what did you make of the whole Joan Zarco Pecco Bagnaia thing during the Thai GP?
I mean, in the end, Ducati's got a championship to win. So if I were the bosses of Ducati, I'd be using everything in my power to ensure that he wins the championship.
That's a very fair assumption because at the end of the day, it's about money. And if you have the MotoGP World Championship under contract, you are selling a whole lot more bikes. And when you're in Joan Zarco's position and your boss tells you, hey, be easy on Pecco, you do it because Ducati saved his career. We talked about it on the last episode of the podcast in length. He was basically out of MotoGP after KTM. And then Avincia came out and signed him. He did very well. Then Ducati promoted him to Pramac. He's doing very good. He's doing a lot of testing for them as well. And he is very valuable to the team. Why would you fuck it up? Because Joan Zarco isn't Fabio Quartararo. He isn't Pecco Bagnaia. He isn't Marc Marquez. He isn't this good that he can do no matter what he wants and won't get fired. He needs to behave in a way in order for Ducati to keep him for the longer period of time. And also he has an employee which tells him, hey, be easy on him, so you do it. I mean, how would you react if you are Joan Zarco in this situation, especially considering the fact that you haven't won a MotoGP race, that you probably think, okay, I could win this motherfucker. How would you?
I mean, that's a really good point considering, he hasn't won a race, but it's also he hasn't tasted the glory of winning a MotoGP race. And I think if he won in Japan or something, he'd be so much more hungry. He would want that feeling again to stand on the top step. But your boss is your boss. In the end, you're there to do a job, and if you're not doing the job to satisfaction, they can bring someone like Marco Bezzecchi into that Pramac team and have him ride the bike, and there'd be probably no love lost between them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, for Ducati, it would be probably better to have an all-Italian lineup and they could pull it off. So, but yeah, Joan Zarco, I totally get it. And with team orders and people getting angry at him, I mean, if you're at work and your boss tells you to do X and you don't do X, he will probably whoop your ass, metaphorically.
Yeah.
Not like Tom Booth Amos. And if you do it repeatedly, you get fired.
Yeah, and I think Zarco, his time will come. I mean, we've been saying that for a few years now, but he's a bit like Aaron Canet, where the win just isn't coming. But if it doesn't happen in the next three races, I almost guarantee it'll happen next year at some point.
I mean, if you can't win on a Ducati, then you can't win at all.
That's very fair.
Yeah, and with Fabio and the whole Ducati thing, he said something very, very funny, which was he hopes that Marc Marquez's comeback will put a little bit more chaos on the Ducatis. But since he said that, all Marquez did was help Ducatis in a way, in Aragon, which is obvious, but also like in Japan or now, if Marquez wasn't there, Fabio would have been one position ahead and Pecco wouldn't be further ahead, So first of all, this is a funny Marcus stat, which I'd like to bring up. And the following point is, what do you make out of Marcus' performance in the wet right now?
Yeah. So Marquez in the wet, he's always been pretty good in the wet. We saw like in Le Mans, even when he made his return when Jack Miller won, he was looking pretty racy, but then he was just rushing himself, wanted to get back on the top step. This year, he's much more focused. He's happy to take the fourth or the fifth place. And I think that's a mature Marquez. I'm not the biggest fan of Marquez. I'm not Spanish or a Honda owner, but I think what he's done for the sport is remarkable, and I think it's good to have him back if he's not dominating. But I would really like to see another Marquez win where he's fighting one of the rookies, and I would like to see a direct head-to-head between Marquez and Fabio Quartararo in a on-track battle.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this a long time now. I will die someday very, very peacefully if Marcus does the equal Valentino Rossi in Valentino Rossi in MotoGP championships. But
Yep,
that
same.
doesn't mean I want him to retire, because MotoGP is always more fun when he's there. And either you hate him or you love him, but he brings in excitement to the sport, which is very, very good, especially when you have a promoter like Dorna, who's absolutely incompetent of marketing everybody else. So you have to have Marc Marquez on there to connect with fans. And he was even shown on the broadcast when he's doing nothing. It's just Marquez. But with his performance, I somehow expected more. I'm a little bit disappointed because he has always been so good in the wet. He was on pole position in the wet. The wet should neglect a lot of disadvantages from the Honda, I feel like. And Marcus is always such a great master of these rain conditions, where I thought, okay, it's not as physically demanding on the body because he isn't at 100% right now as it might be in the dry. So I thought, okay, maybe this could be the day where Marcus wins. He won every Grand Prix except this one in Thailand. He obviously likes the track. He is pain-free right now, according to Marc Marquez. And therefore, I kind of expected more, but maybe my expectations are a little bit off because it's Marc Marquez. And if it would have been everybody else, I would have said, okay, what was it? Fifth place is totally fine,
I think just everything from the wet last week to this week is a little bit flipped. Jack Miller was fast in the wet this time, but in qualifying last time he only qualified seventh, and Miguel Oliveira wasn't anywhere on the front row last time in the qualifying in the wet, but he seemed to bring it out quite nicely in the race. I think maybe just the characteristics of Motegi just suited the Honda a little bit more. Is their track pretty much they test there quite often. So I think they just had a few things in the bag there. But I think coming to Buriram, it's basically it was Marquez's track up until Miguel Oliveira took the crown. He was the only winner in the last 2 years in 2018 and 2019. And coming here, I feel like he wanted to do the hat trick and take the win again. But he's not super hungry, and he knows this year he's not in the championship fight. He can just finish fifth and develop the bike. The fans are happy because they see him, and honestly, fans now are so tired of seeing him get hurt that if he finishes, I think they're like, nice, he finished, like that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, when you're Marc Marquez, you know that another high side could end your career anytime. And he came out and said, I won't change my approach. I won't do this. I won't do that. But I believe that Indonesia and the surgery now gave him like a real warning where, okay, I have to be more careful. And I believe if it's 2021 Marquez, he would have gone for it and be more aggressive and didn't care. But it's a good sign that he seemed to have learned his lesson, that it's sometimes okay to bring home a fifth place and not push every time. I mean, the last time he had a horrible injury was in Indonesia, and he high-sided in warm-up and nobody else did, because it felt like Marc Marquez was pushing it a little bit too much where nothing was on the line. And hopefully he learned his lesson, because nothing is on the line, as you said. Track time is valuable for himself and his arm, as well as for Honda. So this is a very, very solid race. But considering everything, I would have expected a podium or even a win from Marc Marquez, because he is Marc Marquez. He's like the most talented rider on the grid, maybe the most talented rider ever. And
I believe so, honestly. I think in Valencia we could see something special. You might just say, "Oh, it's the good season end break after this. Maybe we'll have to just give it a shot and see where it takes him."
yeah, especially Valencia is an anti-clockwise circuit. Left
Yeah.
corners tend to be more or be less stressful on his arm, on his right arm. So I could see him. The only problem is that the Honda is shit, you know.
I mean, hopefully over the summer they can do some special wizardry in Japan and bring out a nice bike for next year. But as you know, everybody's going to up their game for next year. Let's see what Aprilia do over the summer break. I mean, winter break. Sorry. That could be really interesting to see how they build on this season. But Honda, they really need to get their act together. But with Joan Mir coming in, and even Alex Rins, he's a handy rider at some times. He could give them some advice on where it can be improved. But we all know that Paul Espargaro was no slouch on the KTM, and coming to Honda, he just couldn't ride it. And that kind of brings me on to Joan Mir, and his style, I believe, won't suit the Honda at all.
There are a lot of people who said Joan Mir on the Honda will open some eyes and surprise a lot of people, and I just don't see it. I just
Yeah.
don't see it because A, the Honda is shit, and when you have two new riders and a kind of new rider in Marc Marquez, because he hasn't had that much time on this bike, and with Honda, the whole problem is that they had the perfect bike for Marc Marquez in 2019, 2020. It was just his bike. And they went away from this because nobody else could ride it. So if you listen to Marc Marquez, he says, okay, I want the 2019 bike back, obviously, because that's his bike. I talked with Paul Espargaro at Rocco's Ranch in January, and he told me that the old Honda was so balanced towards the front and had no rear grip at all, and nobody could ride it except Marc Marquez. And the new Honda is a little bit more balanced, where you have good rear grip, and a lot of Honda riders are complaining about the lack of front feeling. So that's basically the thing with the Honda, what state January, what Paul told me. I
Yeah.
guess they developed since quite a few parts on the bike. But in general, this is not Marc Marquez's bike. Then you have Joan Mir and you have Alex Rins coming in new, and you have Taka Nakagami, who's only there because Ayogura didn't want to race with Honda next year. So I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel for Honda, to be honest, because something is wrong with this company at the moment, because they put all their eggs in one basket since 2013, and it paid out for them until Marc Marquez got hurt. And now they're in a situation where Ducati has an armada of bikes on the grid where everybody can be competitive on. Then you have the Aprilias. Next year, you have four Aprilias who are very good. I believe they will do another step forward. The Yamaha, when you give the Yamaha a good engine, is a very, very solid bike.
Yeah.
The
And it looks
Suzuki
like
is a,
they have got a new engine.
yeah. The
Yeah.
Suzuki is an absolute beauty of a bike. It's so unfortunate that they leave, which is,
Yeah.
talking about Honda, very good. But Honda is up in the shitbox category with KTM. At least the KTM works in the wet. So it's not looking bright for them. So
If
yeah.
I were Honda, honestly, I'd be looking at buying the remnants of the Suzuki team, whether that be the engineers and the old bikes, just to try and pull it apart and work out what they've been doing. I think the Honda engine is a good engine, but I think the just the even showing them like outsourcing their swing arm design to Kalex shows that they're in a bit of trouble and they're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the swing arm is coming from Kalex, and I would assume that they're talking with Kalex about other things as well. And they are copying Aprilia's bike. So if you go back in time and tell somebody like in 2016 that Honda, or 2017, whatever, select the year, that Honda is copying the Aprilia and is sourcing things out to Kalex, they will say you're out of your mind.
Yeah, that's very true. Even 2019, the Aprilia wasn't doing too well. Like that was
Yeah.
prime Honda, and say, just 3 years. later that Honda's finishing towards the bottom of the standings. You know, they've had races where not one Honda has finished in the points with for the first time since I think it was 1982. And that's just insane to think about.
That's scandalous for the biggest motorcycle company in the world, because
Yeah.
when you put all your eggs in one basket with Marc Marquez and develop a bike only for him, okay, cool. It didn't work out from 2020 onwards. Okay, cool, just develop a new bike. But that they are not able to develop a bike which can be ridden by a lot of competent riders is difficult to judge from the outside, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And regarding Honda with Takanaka Nakagami, I saw him as a test rider next year because I thought Ayogura will move up, and I don't think that Stefan Bradl isn't particularly doing a good job. I just believe he is, or the whole Honda team was bailed out by Marcus for so long that they forgot how to work. And yeah, which brings us a little bit to the next topic, which is Moto2. We had Ayogura and Augusto Fernandez in the championship fight, still basically 1 point or half a point apart. It can't get any tighter than this. So first of all, regarding the whole Honda situation, when you imagine yourself in Ayogura's position, would you have done the same as he did and said, I don't want to fuck with sprint races, I don't want to fuck with Honda, I just stay in Moto2 in my comfort zone? Or would you say, okay, fuck it, I will go?
I would have gone, honestly. I think you can look at situations like Joe Roberts. He had the opportunity to come up to Aprilia for 2020 or 2021. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But now he's, you know, nowhere in Moto2 again. And I think his MotoGP dreams could be over. And I think if you take that GP offer, you can always go back to Moto2. I think any Moto2 team would take a GP rider, whether you're finishing P20 or, you know, even P25 on some weekends. Like I spoke to Darren Binder over the weekend, and Darren Binder, you know, as much as we clown him for crashing and stuff, like he's learning, and I think he could do something in Moto2. It's unconventional, but we've seen people like the Lowe's brothers do something similar where he's just not gelling with the bike, or, you know, he just needs to develop as a rider. And I think in Moto2, he could do something, and he did confirm to me that he does have a Moto2 seat next year.
Yeah, also the talk is that he goes to Intact. I don't know if
Yeah,
we can officially confirm it.
I can't confirm it. I'm not sure. I mean, you're the German here. You might be able to, you probably know more than me.
Yeah, I don't know more than you, but the common direction where everybody is heading is Intact GP. And this isn't a secret. Go to Everything Motor Racing's Instagram page, and you have a list of where people expect certain riders to go next season. So this is not a secret, you know. And yeah, with Darren Binder, let's be 100% honest here right now and forget all the bullshit. He is doing a good job. He's on a very, very bad bike, which is a good bike for rookies usually, but in comparison to the KTMs, not the KTMs, to the Ducatis, he's on a bad bike. And he is in a very unfortunate situation where he has a 1-year contract going from Moto3 to MotoGP. And he is doing well. And I believe if you gave him like 3-4 years, like they did with Jack Miller, he could be a very good rider in the class, because he obviously has talent. He has his downsides where, first of all, my issue with him is that he got the MotoGP contract, which isn't his fault at all, because if I was him, I would have taken it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't like many of his antics on track. So I like to clown him for this, but with all the memes and shit to the side, he's a very competent rider, and he should get another opportunity in MotoGP. But the whole Suzuki exit wasn't necessarily fortunate for the whole grid.
Seeing him fight with Aaron Canet, Ayagura, and yeah, Pedro Acosta next year could be really interesting. Obviously, him and Pedro know each other from Moto3, and I think Pedro will probably let him through on track a couple of times because of what Darren Binder did for Pedro in 2020. But yeah, let's see.
2021.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
COVID is just one big blur for me.
Yeah.
I still think the 2020 season is happening.
Yeah, I mean this was such a weird period of time because you could go to a GP weekend and nobody knew who was in front. I mean, now you can say, okay, I assume Pecco will be at the front. I assume Jack Miller and Enea Bastianini. Fabio is always a candidate for a podium. Aleix is always there. But 2020 was so wild.
Yeah, I don't know how Joan ended up doing that. Well, he got the one win, but he was just on the podium consistently. I personally would have preferred Morbidelli to have won that one. I think that would have shown Yamaha, who's boss. I think now, he's just, his head's not there. You can tell when a rider shaves their head that they're not having a good time. And I mean, Morbidelli's had that trademark hair for years, but he's just struggling so much on the Yamaha. He shaved his head, it's not a good sign. I mean, even Celestino Vietti, he shaved his head as well, and he seems so demoralized in the paddock. He just walks, doesn't talk to anyone, just head down, just walking slow, not even wanting to get back to his media place fast. Like people ask for a photo, he just goes like, and then like goes down just like sad, and you just want to go over there and like pat him on the back and just, yeah, but his head's gone.
It's weird with Vietti because he was so goddamn good at the beginning of the season. And even going into Catalonia, where he had like a little bit of crashes, a little bit of, unfortunate situations for him. But he still came out guns blazing. He was battling with Aaron Canet, and he took him to school in this race. And it's a little bit sad to see because whatever he does now, it ends up in a crash, and he's so capable of it. And just to go to see his mind going in a weird place right now is sad to see, and I hope that he will recover a little bit over the weekend over the winter break, because he has all the tools to be world champion, and it's still only his second year. He's allowed to make mistakes, and I hope he gets his mind right, because it's a little bit sad to see, especially in the
once your mind goes, it's so hard to get it back. I think the winter break will do him well, and I hope to see him back fighting at the front like he was this year.
Yeah. And with the Moto2 race, we had a conversation about this after the race, which was the red flag. And from the TV, this is my view on the thing, watching it from a dry couch at home. You have a wet race, soaking wet, everybody sees it, but it's kind of in a safe place. You don't see many crashes. You had here and there a crash, okay, normal, as you have in a dry race. But it's not that everybody went out crashing, as we've seen in many dry races in Moto2. And it seemed like the track was still in a condition where you could race in a safe manner. It was wet, yes, but it was still manageable. And then you get a red flag. I don't hate the red flag, because it's sometimes better to red flag the session and then do your business and have no injuries, have no huge crashes, whatever. If there has been some aquaplaning and half the field would have crashed in one turn, like in Portimao, this could have ended badly. So I don't hate the red flag. My issue with the thing is that you want to restart a Moto2 race with 5 laps on the same conditions in the soaking wet, which is to me far more dangerous, because when you have like first turn in our background right now, it's MotoGP, yeah, but Moto2 is basically the same with more riders. And if you have this in such tricky conditions on a 5-lap race where everybody is pushing to the absolute maximum, this is an incident
Yeah.
waiting to happen. And therefore, I hated the idea. And thank God the conditions didn't make it possible and they gave half points, because this was what I would have wanted in Portimao. And it's the same what I would have wanted now. I mean, the red flag is difficult to judge. I understand the decision and I don't hate the decision. I'm not here to debate it. But the 5-lap restart, I absolutely hate it.
Yeah, I think the conditions on track during the race, the corners are fine, the corners have runoff, but you can see on the straight, no one ever thinks there's going to be anything too bad to happen on the straight. But I was watching Philip Salach, and he basically had a high side mid straight where his rear stepped out and he was just going in a straight line, and then like his bum was out of the seat mid straight. Like when it gets to that, and then in Buriram the walls are very close on the straight, and normally that's okay, but it happened to Salach, and then immediately after happened to Ogura, and then you could just see that the race control acted on those two, because if you have a crash on the straight, it's really gnarly, much more gnarly than a crash in a corner. But yeah, bringing on to the red flag thing, honestly, it was the right time to red flag for sure. Honestly, I thought they would do it earlier, but the 5-lap sprint, yeah, you're very right. When they shortened the race to 16 laps, I wasn't the biggest fan of that. We're spectators, we want to see the full race distance, and when you limit it to that, it kind of gives the same effect as the 5-lap sprint where everyone's going for it. But yeah, having carnage at the first corner, it would have been bad. The track, it did stop raining, but then started raining again right before the GP race, so that's why they delayed it further. It was just, I think the actions were just a little bit too slow. I think they could have got the full race distance in, or maybe even another 10 laps of Moto 2 had they have waited 20 minutes after the red flag and then sent them back out. MotoGP race still would have started at the same time as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, with all the TV rights, I guess it's very, very unfortunate if you have to delay races this late. And regarding the straights, what you said, the walls are 1 point, but when you look at the background, you can barely see the safety car or the marshal in the back. And when you have a crash on the straight, let's say Ayogura or Philip Salach would have crashed in those instances, and someone comes from behind and absolutely hammers into them, they are dead. They are dead on the spot, and nobody wants to see this. Therefore, I absolutely don't hate the red flag, but yeah, the restart, thank God it didn't happen.
Yeah, as a rider, a preventative red flag is the best kind of red flag, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think they did the right thing, and half points, it is what it is. Arbolino's not taking the nice 25 bag, but a win's still a win, and he was there when it mattered, and kept it upright, unlike Chantra.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate for Philip Salach, for example, because the red flag came right at the wrong point for him, which was after he made the mistake. And looking at it live, I thought Philip Salach won the race because I thought they would count the last lap, which was completed by the whole grid. And there, I believe that Salach was in front, and I don't know what the fuck they did.
Arbolino did lead for, I think, one full lap right before the red flag.
But as they waved the red flag, the whole grid, only the top 8 riders were over the finish line. So it wasn't like a complete lap. So you have to take the one before for...
Yeah, actually, in the classifications, it did say that, I think from Kubo and onwards, they said they were 1 lap down. So I'm not sure exactly where they drew it, but I think Salach was still happy to be on the podium, so they're not going to dispute that.
Yeah, of course, but it's still unfortunate. How much does it frustrate you? Let's say you're in a race and you are waiting in second position in a wet race because you can judge the track conditions better when somebody is in front, and then you get a red flag and you knew, okay, fuck, I could have won this because I was setting up the overtake. I was just playing it safe right now.
Yeah, in the end, it is the leader, like if a crash had happened in a dry race and you're leading the race and they flag it, it is what it is. If you want to have the best chance of winning, you have to be in the lead and hold it. But obviously, you can scheme from second place, and it's usually much easier to win a race from second place because you can pass them and have choice of where you want to go. But for Salach, if it was a rider like Iagura and Fernandez was in the lead and it was deciding the championship, you'd be very, very, very pissed off because it's basically just deciding the championship with one red flag. And thank God it's not the championship contenders, but still not the best situation for Salach, but still his first Moto2 podium. So,
who's your pick to win the championship?
I think Agura, just because of how focused he was. Like, if he can win at his home race, not many riders can win at their home race because of the whole like event of it. You look at the Spanish riders; they ride in Spain all the time, and for our homecoming to Japan after 3 years of not racing there, and then to be able to put it on the top step of the box, there's nothing that shows a more stronger mentality than that, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like chaos, and I think it would be very, very fun if Iagura wins the championship and stays in Moto2 and has to defend it. And on the other part, obviously I'm a Remy fan, and it would be a little bit better, even though it's not Augusto's fault, if Remy was the Moto2 champ and wasn't replaced by another Moto2 champ, You know what I mean? But it's
Well, I think that would be good for Remy. He'll be like, you're replacing me with some guy who finished
yeah,
second. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, Augusto Fernandez is not just some guy who finished second. He's been really good towards the end of the season, but I think another year in Moto2 with Ayo for Fernandez would have been magical.
Yeah, but as you said, you don't pass it up when there's a MotoGP contract, even when it's a
Exactly.
KTM and your career is probably going to
Nah, gas,
Superbike.
gas.
Yeah,
It's a different. It's going to be
different
different.
bike. Yeah,
Different luck. Different luck.
everything's gonna be better with gas. Which
Yeah.
brings us to Albert Arenas and Jake Dixon. You have some souvenirs which you brought from Thailand. So talk a little bit
Yeah.
about it.
Grab the. I got a slider from Jake Dixon. That was very nice of him. I was going to get my sunglasses signed by them because we wear the same glasses, and it didn't work. So he's like, "Come back tomorrow. I'll grab something else for you." So I just waited outside his pit. He came out 2 sliders. I'm like, "Nice, that's awesome. Thanks, Jake." And then he was like, happy for a chat. I'm just like there, standing, just saying thank you. But he's just standing there telling me about everything. He was just seems so happy to be there. And then as a spectator, that's what you really want to see. And for Arenas, I actually saw Arenas Thursday night and was at the same restaurant as him, just eating, and went over and said hi and good luck for the weekend, basically. And yeah, that was cool. But later that night, I went to a local mall in Buriram and saw Sergio Garcia trying to pay for his ice cream, and it wasn't working. His credit card wasn't working. So I said to Sergio, "No, don't worry, mate. I got you." And then I paid him. It was like 4 or 5 euros. And then he's like, "Okay, tomorrow morning you come to my pit." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not? That's the best ice cream I've ever bought." So that kind of formed our little bond with Sergio. And then I had ice cream with him, chatted to him about his championship hopes. Obviously not looking too good after this weekend, but he's really focused, even though he had the biggest ice cream I've ever seen. Like, I thought those Moto3 guys had to stay super light, but he's having like a triple scoop full chocolate cone sort of thing. I don't know. Anyway, I go back Saturday morning to see him, and I just chat to him a lot. He invites me into the pit. I get to film like Jake Dixon going out on the Moto2 bike. Sergio's just chilling out, eating an apple while he's just showing me around the pit. And then, yeah, I spoke to him after every session. And then after the race, I spoke to him. He's like, "I don't know, what can I do?" It kind of, Adrian Fernandez, messed up his whole championship just in one corner. And I think most riders would have been really pissed off, but he had a really calm mentality, and he knows he's going to a pretty decent team for Moto2 next year. And of course, he wanted to do the title, but I think he knows it's time to just go up and have a new challenge without these guys taking him out.
I guess sometimes it's easier when it's not your fault.
Yeah, exactly. That is a very good point. Like if you're just in contention for a like a podium or something, and you have a mechanical or something, it's a lot easier than crashing out on your own. Although you always wonder what could have been. The mood after is like, what can I do? What can I do? Whether
Yeah.
if you tuck the front going into the final corner and you're leading the race, that's you're never going to forget that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing which solves these problems is kind of the same with Fabio and Aragon, is starting on pole. But even this doesn't save you sometimes, let's say, Taka Nakagami and Catalonia, you know, and these things happen, but usually it's a good solution to start in front and not mid-pack. But that's easier said than done, I guess, no?
Yeah, especially in Moto3 where both practice sessions were a little bit wet towards the beginning and then dried off towards the end. And if you're not super confident in mixed conditions, then you'll end up in Q1 and then anything can happen. So many games were played in Q1 in Buriram, you know, such long straights, they want to be in the toe. And I just saw like about 8 riders, I think, basically parked, like standstill. And I think Dorna should look into that one because that was pretty gnarly from what I've seen. And I think you made a meme about it of them right on the very edge of the circuit next to
Yeah.
the gravel trap. And like, yeah, basically at turn 12, it was even worse because they were doing that on circuit.
Yeah, Moto3 is an absolute disaster, to quote Joel Kelso. Because it's what do you do if you're a rider, you know? You're Izan Guevara going out in Q1 and everybody is following you. I mean, not a single soul was in the pits or anywhere on the circuit. They were all behind Izan Guevara. It was like in a race. What do you do when the slipstream gives you half a second, you know? And you can't tow these guys around. But on the other hand, when you go off track to let them pass, they are not passing you, they're going off track with you. So you're in a very, very unfortunate situation there, which to me can't be handled, because when, let's say, you're Izan Guevara and you're going wide and everybody goes wide with you, do you penalize everybody but Izan Guevara because they're doing the same, you know? But it's
And they
different
can just
because
say they
Izan,
needed to go wide anyway. Yeah.
yeah,
It's very difficult. I think the best thing to do would be a super pole first. That would be great. And then secondly, I think having a minimum lap time in Moto3, especially for qualifying, would be quite interesting, you know, where they can't basically cruise. If you want to go slow, it has to be, you know, fast in the 2 sectors or 3 sectors before the pit entry. And then you can go slow in that final sector if you're coming into the pits. And I think that minimum lap time should be probably the 107% rule. I mean, that's pretty fast for some people like Anna Carrasco. But I'm honestly watching her ride. She's no slouch. You know, she's really quick and she's just missing that 1 or 2 tenths every corner. And honestly, watching her ride, I think it was quite amazing, you know, because she looks just as good as the other guys through the corners. She's just not exiting as fast, I believe, but she's doing a lot better in person than I thought, you know, visually.
yeah,
And
let's be honest,
yeah.
everybody who races in Moto3 is a very, very, very capable motorcycle rider. It's just the comparison is then a little bit off when you're compared to Izan Guevara or Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, and honestly, I think for just women in general, she's doing a really good job. You know, like my mum at the circuit, she really loves the women in the racing. And in Thailand, we have this woman rider called Muglada, who's an absolute ripper on the 600, and she had the 600. She actually, I think she still has the 600cc lap record around Buriram, which is a 1:38, I think. And that's compared to Chantra on a Moto2 bike. I think he did 135 mid for his pole lap, and she's doing 138 on a 600 with a standard engine. Like, she's really, really good. And I think just for women in general that want to get into the sport, I think she's doing a great job, even if she's finishing towards the end of the field.
Yeah, I think it's a bit weird that Ana Carrasco was the one who got the seat, because I felt always like Maria Herrera was the better one of those two. But it's always good for the sport to have this diversity there, because we
Yeah.
talked about all the problems women have in the paddock, and these are things who can be tackled when you have somebody like Ana Carrasco or somebody like Maria Herrera, who are role models to young girls, who aspire young girls. And the whole women team in Aragon with Maria Herrera was a very, 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 very good thing. And yeah, when you take all things into consideration, it's always great for the sport when you add diversity. You know, think of Lewis Hamilton in Formula One.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, they're both doing a really great job. And we saw in Aragon that Maria Herrera, obviously a bit rusty on the Moto3 bike, but bringing it back every session. So if she gets a full-time seat next year, I'll be very happy. And I think the sponsors like to have some diversity in the class as well.
Yeah,
And
of course.
yeah, that brings us on to kind of our one of the newest teams in Moto3, the Vision Track team. And it's Michael Laverty's academy, designed for British riders coming up from the British Talent Cup, and gives them a place to go kind of in Grand Prix. You know, there's a lot of Spanish teams and Italian teams that like to take riders straight from Junior GP or the CIV in Italy. But this class is just designed, I mean, this team is designed for British riders. And I spent a lot of time over the weekend with Scott Ogden and Josh Watley, and they're both very top guys, but both very focused. I think Scott is going to be further up fighting for top tens next year, and Josh, he honestly said to me that he was not supposed to be in Moto3 for another 2 years, but with the Junior GP age restrictions coming in, I'm not sorry, not Junior GP, with the Moto3 age restrictions coming in, he just wanted to get in the class, so when the time was right, he could be in there. And I think that kind of brings us the lens onto the Junior GP and the age restriction now in Moto3, where you have to be 18, when most riders in Junior GP are ready at 16 or 17, but then they have to spend another 250,000 euros each year for another season in Junior GP. It's going to cost families probably another 500,000 euros to get their kid to the World Championship. And then, you know, in that 2 years, more injuries could happen. A rider can lose motivation by just racing in the same class every year. And I think it's not very good for the sport. But I mean, some of the Moto3 riders believe that it's just don't have to look like they're doing something.
Yeah, I talked with Joel Kelso a lot about this, and also the downsides, the upsides of all. And he said something really interesting, which I would never think of by myself, which was, when you're 18 and you're racing in Moto3, it's your decision. When you're 15, 16, 17, there are people, supposedly, he didn't mention any names, who died, who didn't even want to be in the championship because their parents forced them to be there. And at least you can guarantee, when you're 18, you're doing this because you want to do it. And I guess it's a very, very tricky question, which is, you know, you can do an age limit, of course, but it won't solve any of the issues except like 1 or 2%. But this is a really interesting point, and everybody,
I haven't
if you
heard that
have
one
time,
before. I think that's
if you have time, listen to the Joel Kelso podcast, because he has some great insights there. And also, we talked about the whole Moto3 thing, where he said the Moto3 is a disaster. And my solution, like for a couple of years now, would be, the bikes right now are 250 cc bikes with like 80 kilogram more or less in weight. keep the bikes basically as they are right now, but give them 300 cc's, which would benefit all the manufacturers. You could bring in new manufacturers because all the road bikes are 300 cc. You almost see no 250, at least in Europe, and maybe in Southeast Asia it's a little bit different. And also you would give them a little bit more horsepower, which could neglect or minimize the slipstream effect a little bit more, where you don't have these big groups anymore where those incidents tend to happen.
Honestly, I've thought about this, and I think the way to do it is just to design a fairing. I think people more like with more expertise in like aerodynamics can probably do this, but they can make the fairing so they create such dirty air that it's almost impossible to follow. And because the air behind will be actually faster and more like hitting worse air than being in clean air, that could help it, but it would maybe make racing shit. I guess they have to find the happy medium between those. But I would like to see a super twins sort of class in Moto 3, maybe with twin cylinder, maybe up to 500cc engines. I think the Moto 2 class is good, and with the triple and the 765, but I think something around 500cc would be better. Still the lightweight class, but yeah, just a little bit more powerful and less reliant on the slipstream.
Yeah, I can't remember who it said. I believe it was Loris Bas, but I can't remember. It could be totally wrong. But somebody who has a fair amount of respect in the motorcycle community said it's far safer to go into World Supersport 600 than to go into the 300, because the 300 are so heavy and they have so little power that it's almost impossible as a rider to make a difference, that you have those incidents where people unfortunately injure themselves or die or whatever, because the bikes aren't giving you the room to be safe. And it's actually safer to be on a 600 than to be on the 300.
Yeah, honestly, that's very true. That's why I'm on 400s now. But even in Thailand, our 400s are special. They're around 70 horsepower instead of the usual 55 that you get in Super Sport 300. So we got a little bit more power to play with. But the slipstream is obviously yeah, very gnarly. But it's a national championship, so the gap in riders' ability is a bit larger than you see in the World Championship. So it's generally safer, and that's where I think the World Championship should be. Yeah, 600s up.
I like the old Moto 2 very much. They were, to me, one of the purest bikes at least in my lifetime, where you had no electronics, you had no traction control, no wheelie control, you had no ride-height devices, you had no winglets, yada, yada, yada. It was just everybody basically on the same bike, who's the best rider. And it was fun. And the way they were sliding into the corners, it was so beautiful.
Yeah, now the Triumph engine doesn't produce as much engine brake, so you don't see that nice slide anymore. But the triple gives it more linear power. So in the end, it's a nicer bike to ride because it doesn't have that really steep power band like the 600 does.
How much does your bike weigh?
My bike is 146 kilograms.
With fuel or without?
Well, it's just minimum weight after qualifying.
Okay, so you add fuel for the race, and it gets like to
Yeah,
150,
we calculate, and it's
160.
about, well, we you completely full of fuel for a race, it's about 153, and then we usually go to 146.5. We do our fuel calculations very
Okay.
close.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the ratio from weight to power is as usual not that significant as in Moto 3 or Moto 2, for example, because it's a world championship. Of course, it's different, or especially Moto 3, MotoGP, I'm sorry, where they have 300 horsepower and the bike weighs 150 kilograms. It's basically the same weight as your bike, but 5 times more horsepower.
With yeah, like triple or quadruple the amount of horsepower.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, but going back to Moto3, there are a few things I would like to ask you. First of all, Sergio Garcia in the Moto3 championship fight, he had a very difficult second half of the season. What do you make from his approach to the race? Is he kind of done with the whole championship thing, or what's his state of mind? Because I can imagine that it's difficult if basically your 2-year teammate is taking you to school in almost every race when you are
Yeah,
supposed to be the more experienced one.
he knows in Moto3 it's the luck of the draw, and he knows very well that he'll make the difference when it comes to Moto2. And I think he's got his sights set on beating Guevara next year. And I think this year he seemed a little bit in terms of like he has acceptance now for how the championship's going, and that could unlock some new performance, hopefully in qualifying for him in Australia. But in the end, he's starting to ride off the championship for this year for sure.
Okay. And what's their relationship like?
I not once did I see them talk. No.
Okay. So you can imagine that they're basically not best friends.
Yeah, because Sergio Garcia and Albert Arenas were talking a lot, and then also Jake Dixon and Sergio having a little bit of a chat. But yeah, Izan was the one who I didn't see talk to any other riders in the Aspar team.
Yeah, I guess Izan is not there to make friends. He's there to make W's, and he's doing it pretty consistently. And yeah, preseason, I said Izan Guevara is my championship pick. It's looking good right now, but he seems to have this little edge over Sergio and over Foggia, that when he's in front, he just has this raw pace where nobody, even in Moto3, where the slipstream is so important, nobody can give him anything.
Yeah, and I mean even in Buriram we saw a leading group of 3 pull away, and even Foggia just yeah, your meme summed it up perfectly. Like Foggia when he's in the championship fight, he's nowhere, but when he's not in it, he's a beast. And the same thing sort of happened in 2021, yeah, last year, where towards the end he started really racking up the wins, and it's just too late.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, last year was a bit of a bummer because I thought that Dennis Foggia versus Pedro Acosta in Portimao in the last lap would have been an absolute banger. And I believe that Pedro would have won it because Pedro
Yeah.
has this maturity where he's above everything. And it's a kind of a feeling you get from him that you get from a Marc Marquez, from a Valentino Rossi, that he's above, head and shoulders above everybody else. And even when you remember in the free practice where he was like waving to Dennis Foggia, where he was just playing mind games, and
That was
he
awesome,
was
honestly.
he was beating him in Portimao when the first time they came. So I was really looking forward to it, and Darren Binder fucked it up for me. And I attended the race live. This was even more of a bummer. But yeah.
It's racing. It can happen. And honestly, I think it's a shit thing. I think Pedro Acosta probably would have won that title. And I also think that, Darren Binder going straight to the Leopard garage it kind of shows what kind of guy he is. He owns up to it. I know it's unfortunate. As soon as you take out one person in motorcycle racing, it's not a good feeling, but it happens again, then your reputation's there. And once it's there, it affects you sort of. And I think that's kind of what happened with Darren. And you just get like a little bit demoralized, and then people kind of say that's what you do. So if it happens, you don't really care. But he still cared, and he had the balls to go to see Leopard, and obviously they weren't ready for him yet. They told him to, go away, to put it nicely. But yeah.
What are your expectations for Josh Watley in the long term? Do you think he can make it in the championship, or do you think he's just there for fun?
He's got the backing, but he did say to me if he's not in GP, he's going to quit racing. it's what he's all about. He wants to stay in Grand Prix, and he knows that he'll be better once he gets onto a Moto 2 bike, but he just needs to cut his teeth in Moto 3 first. And he said probably 2 or 3 more years in Moto 3 before he even considers going up to Moto 2.
How tall is he?
He's probably about 170, but he's a little bit of a stocky rider. Reminds me of a Remy Gardner, barring the height.
Okay. Yeah, Remy is a little bit bulky from naturally bulky, It's not like he told me he barely goes to the gym. He just running, and he's really muscular from just being a
Yeah, I
motorcycle
think
racer.
if you look at like a BMX rider or something, they've got the fat calves, for pumping the bike, and they're like really stocky, but they're really still fit. And I think Remy's just got that build where he's just a bit buff, from birth.
Yeah, it is what it is. And is Vision Track thinking about a Moto 2 team?
Not that I know of, but they're definitely trying to build on their Moto 3 campaign. I mean, Scott's got a decent tally of points. I think he's got 21 or 22 points, which is not too bad for your first year in Moto 3. Obviously, he's still learning quite a lot. He's still really young, as well as Josh, who's, they're both, I think, born in 2005. Actually, I think Josh is 2005. It's really soon. We think about 2005, it's not too long ago. He's still only 17 years old. He's got plenty of time. You look at John McPhee, still in Moto 3 at age 28. If you take that as a age limit, which it is for the class, Josh has plenty of time to make it work out.
Yeah, I believe it's really important when you have a young rider and put them into a team which is competent, which develops them, because it's not only the development of the rider in itself, it's also the development of your work ethic, of your personality, of your maturity, how you deal with things. And I believe that it's very, very important for either Scott or Josh to stay in a familiar workplace where they can grow as young men into adults. And regarding Joel Kelso, he's switching to Bristol, and I felt a little bit not bad about it, because I thought, okay, why not stay there? Because CIP seemed like a great team and all of this, and they gave him a shot last year, so I didn't really understand it. And he explained it to me like, when you have teams in Moto 3, you don't know why, for example, Ayo or Gasgas is so much faster than CIP or whoever on a KTM. And you see it with David Munoz. He's putting the team out of nowhere. And you just don't understand it, how some teams are faster than others. But after seeing the CIP video, I'm not that ungrateful that he got out of there. So I'm wishing Kelso all the best for the future, and also Scott Ogden and Josh Watley, I believe.
Yeah, I think just one more thing on Josh is that I think he lost a lap because someone cut in front of him, or like pushed him wide during a qualifying, or I think it was a qualifying run, and he would have been on for a time that would have been probably within a second of the top guys, and he just handled it, like really maturely. Like, he knows he had the speed at that time, but he just didn't pull it together. But in the end, the race didn't really go his way. He struggled a bit with the heat, and I think he'll do well in Phillip Island, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to soak all these things in and learn from it and build over a couple of years. And I'm really looking forward of Casey O'Gorman, because he can race. He's really good, especially at the beginning of the year in the Rookies Cup. He was so good. And he's racing with Vision Track in the ETC. And I really hope that they support him, because he is struggling financially a little bit. Motorcycle racing is expensive, as you know better than basically everybody out here. And I really hope that Michael Leverty and the whole team give him the support he needs and support him over his on his way to the Moto3 championship, because I
Yeah.
believe that Casey can really do something. When you're out there in the Rookies Cup and you're battling with Rueda, with Colin Vire, you can race. You're good, and he just needs to have a good surrounding where he doesn't have to struggle about finances, where he can go to school and learn racing and be not as stressed with the traveling. And I really hope that the Vision Track team can be a good family for him to develop the talent, which
Yeah.
is obviously there.
I think it's perfect kind of having two rookies and then the brand new team as well. Because I know the team boss, Taylor McKenzie, it's his first year in the Grand Prix paddock running a team. And then the mechanics there, it's their first year with that team and everyone's very new. So they're not putting any pressure on each other. And I think it's a good environment for them to develop.
Yeah, I guess it's with everything in life the same. When you're in a comfortable, when you have comfortable surroundings, good people to work with, you're generally going in a positive direction. And yeah, if you have a toxic environment where you get blamed, for example, when you don't have a good race, or where something happens which wasn't your fault, and you get kicked and punched after your bike breaks down, then it's not necessarily the best for a rider's development, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what's your plan for the rest of the season? How's the whole thing in Thailand working?
Well, we got one more round for the rest of the season, and hoping to put just a late charge for race wins. I mean, I had a few podiums in the last rounds, and yeah, I had a pretty tough start to the year with a mechanical and a just a race where I didn't have enough track time. And when I finally got the track time, I was, within 1.7 seconds of the all-time lap record. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. I'm ready to get back on track after watching the GP bikes go around. I know I can go a lot faster, and I'm hoping to do it on track.
I wish you the best luck. I hope you forgive me that I'm not very educated on Thai motorcycle racing.
It's
So
okay.
yeah. So what's your plan for next season then?
Next season, still undecided, but it looks like I could be staying with my current team and making a title charge on the 400s.
Okay, but your plan is definitely to stay in Thailand.
Um, well, last year I did Moto America, and that was really cool, but I didn't gel with Dunlops too well. So maybe looking at Australia because they use Pirellis, or staying in Thailand on Bridgestones or Pirellis.
Okay. Therefore, I wish you the best of luck for the next race. When exactly is it?
3rd to 4th November.
Okay, perfect. So keep me updated, please. And
Sure.
I wish you all the best for next season. Thank you very much for joining me and this exciting chat. I learned a lot of new things, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, so maybe we can repeat it someday in the future. It was great talking to you, and goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me.